What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Rascal Reacts, where you ask for my 2 cents and I'll give you a nickel. So this case has gotten a lot of attention, right? And I feel like the narrative, the dominant narrative that's being pushed, um, is interesting to say the least. And so we're gonna get into this. I normally don't read articles on this channel or on the Homie Hangout, right? Which is my main channel. I'm doing it in this case because it's what I'm going to use to jump off into other segments. I have the arrest affidavit for the guy who killed this girl, his criminal history. Like, there's a lot of stuff to show you guys. So I'm just going to use this USA Today article to kind of jump off into those other topics, right? So feds charged man in fatal using a knife on Ukrainian refugee on Charlotte train. And I'm sorry that I got to talk like a 2-year-old who's scared to use bad words, but that is the state of social media and in particular YouTube, as I learned with the Homie Hangout being hit. So anyways, the Department of Justice on December 9th charged a man in the fatal ending of the life of 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee in Charlotte, North Carolina, the latest case fueling the Trump administration's condemnation of violent crime in cities run by Democrats. Decarlos Brown, 34, faces a charge of committing an act causing death on a mass transportation system in connection with the using a knife that ended the life of Iryna Zarutska on August 22nd inside a light rail car. He also faces a previously filed state charge of first-degree ending of life in connection with what authorities say was an unprovoked attack. So he's charged at the state level, and then the feds picked it up, right? Because they want to be able to have all these press conferences. And so that's how you do that. Iryna Zarutska was a young woman living the American dream. Her horrific murder is a direct result of failed soft-on-crime policies that put criminals before innocent people, said Attorney General Pamela Bondi in a statement. It's interesting. I do believe that it is horrible what happened to her, absolutely. And I'm sure that she was living the American dream, being in this country from 3 years, fleeing a war-torn country, right? A war that never should have happened to begin with, but that's another story. It's just interesting, Pam Bondi's characterization of Zarutska, right, from Ukraine, as opposed to her characterization of immigrants from, say, Mexico, Central America, or other places where people tend to have a little bit more melanin in their skin than this beautiful young lady in the image. And why do we have these big pictures in this big press conference? It's pretty fucking obvious, okay? Race is a big topic in this country, whether folks want to believe it or not, and regardless of what side you fall on. And this poster, these posters that she has on either side of her, this is the nightmare scenario for a lot of Americans. Not most Americans, but for a lot of Americans. The guy on the right is the boogeyman, and the girl on the left is the angel. And in this case, I'm sure that young lady is an angel. This is not in any way to disparage her, right? She did not deserve this. It is unfortunate what happened. This dude should never see the light of day again. Absolutely. Because what he did to her is not something you should be allowed to do to somebody in a civilized society. Full stop. No question. Like I said, we're going to get into his history a little bit, right? So the narrative is, hey, this happened in August. The media doesn't want to pick it up because it doesn't fit their narrative, right? The legacy media, as Elon Musk calls them, or the liberal media, or the mainstream media, or whatever cute word that conservatives come up with to describe where most people get their news from. They don't want to talk about this because they don't want Americans to think that black guys hurt white girls. They only want you to think that white guys hurt black guys, right? It sounds stupid, when you put it that way, but that's really what fucking some people believe. So in light of that, I wanted to show you guys something that I thought was kind of curious myself, right? And then we're going to get back to this story. And like I said, we're going to get into this dude, his criminal history and all that stuff. So let's pause on that. Oh, my bad. My paper. Let's take that off the screen. Let's put this on the screen. And let's take a look. Neighbor claims he spoke with alleged gunman moments before triple homicide. Incident under investigation. I want you guys to see the date of this crime. Right? It was published September 3rd, 2025. This is over Labor Day weekend. Now, I don't have a calendar in front of me, but I'm pretty sure Labor Day weekend of 2025 was not particularly long ago. And this is in a suburb of Cincinnati. So let's listen to this. Here we go.
We're here at Good Samaritan Hospital. Tri-Health has confirmed 2 of the female victims worked here. Employees at a Sunoco gas station on the west side also confirmed the male victim recently worked there while attending IT classes. Now, how it is these victims knew each other and their relationship with the shooter, as well as a motive, that's still unclear. One neighbor, though, tells me a chilling encounter he had with the suspect moments before that shooting makes him believe it was premeditated.
He parked his car right there in front of our place and got out and circled the apartment building and kept looking for something, and then got in his car, drove away.
Doug Matthews says he saw the alleged gunman do that 2 more times Sunday afternoon.
I went over and asked him, was he okay? And he said yes, he was, he was not unfriendly. My dog went up to him and he played with the dog for a second. And I said, well, you got a friend for life. And he said, no, maybe for a minute. And then he said, you can go now.
Minutes later, gunfire erupted from that same apartment.
So that's creepy, right? Like, that sounds kind of like a monster, right? You got a friend for life. No, maybe for a few minutes. So this is a long news clip. I'm not going to play it all because I want to get back to the shit that I want to talk about. But the gist of it is this, right? Suspected shooter in a triple homicide that took place in Mount Washington over Labor Day weekend has died. Samuel Tyler Erickson, 26, has been identified as a suspect in the shooting, according to the Cincinnati police. That is the suspect. These are the victims, right? Demet Dures, Eden Adunga, and Fiven Adunga. These are 3 Ethiopians, right? They are Ethiopian immigrants living the American dream. The girls worked at a hospital. The guy was taking IT classes. And they all got murdered sitting in their home. And by some white guy, right? For whatever reasons. Who knows? Now, that murder is also horrific. That's probably a murder that you haven't seen a lot about on the news. Right? I certainly haven't. Why? Is it because it doesn't fit a narrative? Is it because this? Is it because that? Like, come on. There's no press conference. There's no federal charges. There's no billboard showing the white guy within the 2 black girls in the black guy's face. Right? Where's that? Is it because, again, people don't care? No, crime happens in this country. We live in a pretty violent society. People lose their lives for a bunch of different reasons. This dude apparently has some mental health issues. Maybe they were long-term. Maybe just he snapped that day, right? I don't know in terms of what happened here in Cincinnati, right? The news clip that I just showed you and the pictures I just showed you. I don't know. But is there a big to-do? Is Elon Musk posting about it? Is he showing you how many times he searches for this case versus how many times an article comes up when he searches a case from fucking years ago? No, that's not happening, right? So, again, this political pandering to kind of the lowest IQ population is just ridiculous, right? And so now that the feds have picked this up, this is a death penalty case, right? It's not a death penalty case in the state system, but ending a life of somebody on a mass transportation, that makes it a death penalty case. And they're probably going to pursue the death penalty. Now, the dude has already been, when he first got arrested for the murder, the Decarlos Brown guy, right? He has already been submitted to court to get a mental health evaluation to see if he's even competent to stand trial. But let's talk about this whole, putting criminals before innocent people and all this other stuff. And then we're going to get into his criminal history, because I've seen reports that his criminal history is a mile long. He never should have been out on the streets and this and that. And question the truth of that. But so let's look at this clip. Not clip, but article. Attorney General Jeff Jackson, that's the Attorney General of North Carolina, advocates to protect nearly $42 million of North Carolina law enforcement funding. What? Why? These funding cuts are unlawful and would make it harder for North Carolina law enforcement officers and prosecutors to protect our communities. These funds have already been working to help our communities, and the federal government has no right to eliminate them. What federal government could he be talking about? The same federal government that employs Attorney General Pam Bondi, right? So the Department of Justice rescinded $500 million in funds to hundreds of organizations and whatnot. North Carolina is one of those places. They filed a brief in June of this year trying to tell the Supreme Court that, hey, Congress allocated these funds already, and Trump and his administration and Attorney General Pam Bondi doesn't have a right to pull this money away. And in pulling this money away, North Carolina could lose nearly $42 million in grants that support law enforcement, prosecutors, victim services, substance abuse, and mental health treatment. Oh, shit. So while we're pandering in these press conferences about, these political parties and that political parties, North Carolina also doesn't have an approved state budget. Why not? Because the governor of North Carolina is a Democrat, and the lawmakers of North Carolina is controlled by the Republicans, and they don't like the budget that he put forward. And the budget that he put forward includes increased funding for law enforcement, as well as other things. And the Republicans don't like it because they have an individual tax rate of 4.25%, which I'm recording this from California. It fucking must be nice. But they have a individual tax rate of 4.25%, and they refuse to accept anything that's under or that's over 4%. They want the individual tax rate to be dropped to 3.99%. They're saying, hey, this money to do this has to come from somewhere, right? So we're going to freeze these tax cuts for people. And they don't like that, right? Because they just, that goes against their political beliefs. And what is the consequence of saying that individuals, should have more of their money and wealthy people shouldn't pay their fair share in taxes? That means the government doesn't necessarily have the same amount of money that they need. And what does the government do? They employ people like fucking cops. So would the budget have changed this situation? No, absolutely not. Would this, not releasing these funds, would that have changed the situation? No. I'm not blaming Republicans for the death of this girl at all. I blame the dude who booked her on the train. It is his fault, right? So don't get twisted where I'm going with this. But since they want to turn this into political theater, right? Since suddenly they care about immigrants, and want to make this a political issue, let's talk about the politics of it. The politics of it is our country politically is a mess. And it is a mess from Democrats, and it is a mess from Republicans. And everybody's just trying to score their political points with the public because politics has become an emotional subject. And while these fools are bickering and all these wealthy people are taking shots at each other, individuals are losing their lives on trains because we have a horrendous mental health care system, because we let JCATs decide. And for those that aren't familiar, JCATs is just the old term from the California prison system for people with severe mental health issues, right? Used to be category J. So we let these JCATs decide whether or not they want treatment. Like, why are you going to ask a crazy person if they need help? Okay. And they say no, and you believe them, but also you're going to say that they're crazy. It doesn't make any sense. It's nonsensical, but they have rights and they have this and they have that. And that leads to the ending of this girl's life when all she's trying to do is ride the train home from work. Right. And that is a tragedy that should not be lost in this situation. But it also should not be turned into political theater to inflame racial tensions and everything else in this country. Now, as for this dude, should have never been out because he's just some career criminal, right? That has, the other thing I heard, and then I'll get to his criminal history, right? The other thing I heard is that there must have been, this was racially motivated. It was absolutely racially motivated. And that's that. Okay, well, let's look at his arrest paperwork, okay? And then we'll see. It says, and this is the arrest affidavit from law enforcement, right? This is from the county, so they know better than somebody on fucking TikTok. So this is the arrest processing center. I'm not going to read everything, but it is this dude, Decarlos Bown Jr. And when it gives this little breakdown right here, it says on 8/22/2025 at approximately 21:55 hours, Central Division officers received an assault with a deadly weapon with injury call for service that was occurring on a train of the Lenox Blue Line at 1821 Camden Road. The call comments included that a female was just hit with a knife in the throat by a black male wearing a black shirt, light blue jeans, and orange hoodie. Officers responded to the scene and were directed by witnesses to the location of the defendant, Decarlos Bown Jr., who was on the outbound light rail platform. The defendant was wearing the same clothing as described by the 911 callers and had a laceration on the outside of his right hand. The defendant was arrested and transported to a local hospital for treatment. A folding knife was located near the outbound platform. The victim was located in the rear car of the train of the inbound platform. She was pronounced deceased at 22:05 hours. She sustained a stab wound to the middle of her throat. Detectives obtained video from inside the train of the car. The video is clear and of ID quality. The victim enters the train and sits in the seat directly in front of the defendant. The train travels for approximately 4.5 minutes before the suspect pulls a knife from his pocket, unfolds the knife, pauses, then stands up and strikes at the victim 3 times. Blood visibly drips on the floor. The defendant walks away from the victim. Victim goes unresponsive shortly after the attack. The defendant is the assailant on the video. There appears to be no interaction between the victim and defendant. The detectives are seeking a charge for murder, obviously. There appears to be no interaction between the victim and the defendant. That is what all the news reports are saying. But people on social media are insisting we know better. And of course there was something. Something was said. Something was done. Da-da-da-da-da. Okay, well, the cops that investigated and looked at the video and fucking arrested the dude said that there appears to be no interaction between them. Again, whatever was going on in the dude's head, who knows? He was crazy. So who knows what's going on in his head? But is this a reflection of any other broader societal stuff or anything else? No, it is a crazy guy with a pocket knife that ended this girl's life. And that is unfortunate. But should the dude have been in jail? Right? Should he have been in prison for his 14 other crimes and all this other stuff? Let's take a look at that. Right? Let's look and see. So he does have quite the criminal history, and if you just look at this and don't actually do any homework, right? So you can see, yes, there are 14 things that are listed here, 16 because of the murder and because of the 911 thing. Those are the pending. So this is him calling 911 in January and him being arrested for abusing the 911 system, but that case was never adjudicated. And then this is his murder case. So absent these two, there's 14 other introductions on here. And if you don't actually look and care to do any research and you just want to be lazy, then you jump to the conclusion that, yeah, he must have this crazy criminal history. I'm going to tell you what his criminal history is, which started in 2011. I looked up every one of these cases and got the details for all of them, right? There really ain't much, to be honest. He has 2 main cases. One of them is threats. One of them is speeding. He was doing 82 and a 65. There's a shoplifting, right? None of that's the kind of stuff that you go to prison for life for. The threats case was dropped. All those are misdemeanors. He's got destruction of property, right? He's a homeless JCat. Okay, so keep that in mind. 3 or 4 of those entries that I'm looking at here, 4 of them are the bail company coming after him because he owes for bond, right? So he was bonded out on $500. Now he owes $1,000. Another times he was bonded out for $500. He owes $1,012. One time he has it paid off. He was bonded out for $2,500 at some point. And now he owes $3,084.13. So the crimes that he did, like actual cases, right? His felonies is there's a breaking and entering, larceny, and then conspiracy to commit breaking and entering and conspiracy to commit larceny. All of that happened in 2013. He was convicted and sentenced to 5 to 15 months in jail with credit for 41 days time served. I don't know exactly how long he did. I didn't find those records, but he caught a case like almost a year later. And so he didn't do the whole 15 months. But 5 to 15 months for breaking and entering and stealing is a pretty average case, right? Especially for somebody with no felony background. That's a pretty average sentence. I don't know a lot about North Carolina laws and how they how they do stuff over there. But in California, you know, it is what it is. Then in August of 2014, he gets a robbery, right? Robbery with a weapon and then possessing a gun. So that's his big felony case, okay? He gets 73 to 100 months in prison, and he gets fined $4,796.74. So 73 to 100 months is a little over 6 years to like over 8 years. For a robbery, that's again a pretty reasonable sentence. Like, are we gonna start giving people life fucking sentences for robbery just in case they get out of jail and spaz out and stab a girl on a train? Like, what do you expect? He got busted for robbery. He had a gun. His prior was a breaking and entering, and he went to prison. And he did 5+ years on that 73 to 100 months. Don't know exactly how long he did, but then he was out again, January 2025. He called 911, making a bunch of erratic statements, which is what JCats do sometimes. And then tragically, on August 22nd of this year, he ended this girl's life on this train. And again, should he ever be released? Absolutely not. Is he going to actually get the death penalty? No, there's no way. We have constitutional protections against executing mentally ill people. That doesn't mean he should be released. That doesn't mean he should not be held accountable. That doesn't mean any of that. But you can't execute somebody who doesn't even know left from right, okay? And according to his family and according to reports and according to the judge who arraigned him initially on this murder case back when it was a state charge, the dude's a JCat, right? And so, again, that doesn't mean he's not responsible. I got to keep re-emphasizing that because people hear what they want to hear. I'm not saying he should be out and about. I would not want that dude as my neighbor. I don't want him around my loved ones or my relatives. But when the mayor says this is a mental health issue, she is right. It is also a criminal issue because now he killed somebody and he's going to go to prison and he's never going to get out. Okay, that is what it is. And that is the appropriate consequence. Nothing is going to bring this girl back. Just like with this dude who killed the 3 people in Ohio, right? And executed all 3 of them living in America. Nothing is going to bring them back. I believe that dude shot himself afterwards and ultimately passed from his own injuries. So there's not going to be any criminal case. But I just use that to highlight, like, here's a story of an immigrant killed by an American citizen, and they were of different races. And here's another story of immigrants, 3 immigrants, in fact, killed by an American citizen, and they're of different races. And one of them becomes all this news, and the other one is not talked about. And the one that's all this news, everybody keeps insisting that it's not actually news. They're talking about it because nobody else wants to. The mayor of North Carolina, of the city of North Carolina, right? Charlotte, I think. I was gonna say Charlottesville, but that's where the people march around with the tiki torches and shit. But I think it's Charlotte, North Carolina. She had said thank you to the family, thank you to the news outlets that didn't show the video. And Republicans jumped on it. Conservatives on social media jumped on it, and their various talking heads saying that it's because she's trying to hide the crime. She's trying to hide the crime. She doesn't want people to know because it's her failed policies. First of all, she's the fucking mayor. Like, she doesn't have a whole lot of power to do anything about this JCat. So to say that she's at fault is ridiculous. But also, she is a black female, and we know how Trump feels about black women. So it is what it is. She couldn't have done nothing. But her saying that, hey, thank you for not showing the actual video, I don't think it was an attempt to cover up crime. I think it was the same thing we see with YouTube, where families will reach out sometimes and say, hey, man, we're trying to grieve and we don't want to see videos and thumbnails with our loved one on it all the time and then have to relive this. If you think about in the California Department of Corrections, in terms of homicides, right, there's been a bunch, right, much more higher than average the last couple years. The Grinch murder is now known as the Grinch murder. Let me get all this shit off the screen. Is now known as the Grinch murder. Why? Because there's video of this very graphic homicide that happens in the day room in Salinas Valley. And when people see video, they react differently. There's video of this girl losing her life on the train. That is going to inflame passions. That is going to get spread around. That is going to go viral. And then again, with the racial component and everything else. It's interesting because a lot of times they don't release these kinds of videos. Kind of makes you wonder why the train company decided to release this video when it's an active homicide investigation. But whatever. I'm sure it doesn't have anything to do with politics. So it just, I think we need to take a step back. And if you want to fix problems, you have to understand what the problem is. The problem is not what news network chooses to talk about what crimes. That is not really a problem. If that's our biggest problem, we're living in a pretty damn perfect country. The problem is what is actually happening. And what is happening is not because this political party has a monopoly on solving crime and this political party this and that political party that. We have systems in this country that are failing in red states and in blue states equally. That is our mental health stuff. We let JCats decide if they need treatment. Yes, there are some crimes that don't get punished too severely. Look at Jake Carl. He should have never been walking around. So yes, that is a thing, but this is not an example of that thing. The dude committed a robbery and got 6 to 8 years in prison, did his time and came home. This is where knee-jerk policies come from. This is how you get 3 strikes and guys end up doing a life in prison for stealing a candy bar as their 3rd strike when it was predicated on a child being harmed. But yet children are still being harmed and those dudes don't even fall under the 3 strikes. So we let ourselves get caught up in this emotional stuff without stopping to think. And if as a country we would just stop and think and talk to each other, we could actually come up with remedies for this. You can't control what a crazy person does, but you can control if the crazy person is walking down the street and riding a train with your loved one. So again, condolences to this lady, condolences to the 3 Ethiopian immigrants who lost their life when they were just sitting at home. They too were living the American dream just as much as her. Nobody's life matters more or less than the other one, no matter what they say from the podium in the press briefing room of the White House. So help others move in excellence, man. That's what homies do. That's my other channel. This is Rascal Reacts. If you ask for my 2 cents, I'll give you a nickel. Stay tuned.